Interspersed with today's video, you're going to see some pictures. Today, it marks 40 years that Brenda and I have been married. So the pictures are from different points of our life and in the journey of the relationship of marriage. A lot's changed, a lot has happened. I never would have thought all that I've experienced would have been a part of life 40 years ago, standing in a church, saying vows to each other, and then having a reception in the church basement. So the little snippets of today's video interspersed with pictures, I hope you enjoy them and enjoy the reflection I have on what marriage has been in my life. Those two photos show a lot about how Brenda and I began our time together. It was the normal, classic church wedding. It was Brenda's home church. And we had people involved with our wedding who were friends who, the whole dress-alike sort of thing. I remember, at least for the guys, that instead of renting suits, we bought them, and I believe they were from J.C. Penney, so a lot has changed. And just a few weeks ago, Brenda finally had that brown wedding suit of mine, allowed it to be taken to a resale thrift store so somebody else could benefit from it. Following the wedding, a reception was held in the church basement. A small basement, pretty crowded, but that was the way things were typically done. Not dances, not big receptions after the wedding, at least in that part of the state and for that community. Another factor that played into that was not wanting to have a dance where alcohol was freely served, because that would create problems for some family members. That was the cover of the bulletin that was handed out for the service. Inside of that cover were 4 pages of the printed service, of order of service and prayers and responses from the congregations, and a hymn that was printed out. The cover of the bulletin was a reproduction of, if you look back at the whole wedding party, there's a banner up there, kind of a tapestry or a needlework kind of banner, which a woman by the name of Pat Bell, she was the partner of Pastor Dan Bell, who I worked with while I was at the seminary, but a picture that illustrated the cross, Christ as the center, and a circle with the leaves, kind of a growing vine off of that. So the circle is kind of a oneness or a continuation of growth, which is what the leaves represent. And then the 2 candles at the bottom being the individual spirit or life, if you wish to say, of Brenda and I. A lot of symbolism in that tapestry and in that bulletin cover. And yet what I think draws the center of attention, I would assume, would be the cross. But for me, part of what stands out more now are the 2 individual candles, and how we as individuals have not only grown but changed. Maybe that leaf structure is part of that as well. That at one point that the church seemed to consume our time and our efforts, this idea of being a pastor and a deaconess and all that the church meant to us. But over the years, for myself, that has changed. Not that the church or that community of faith people is not important, but the whole structure, the whole bureaucracy, the whole issue that I've had for years, but maybe at the time of being married I squashed it down a bit, but that whole idea of authority and this is the way it has to be, where I was probably way more adventurous or had a wanderlust spirit, where in many ways Brenda was probably more conservative or more compliant, even though in those mid-20 years when we got married, oh yeah, everything was up for grabs and everything was important as far as adventuring and looking at things and going out and making our way in the world. So now you've seen a couple more photos. The first one of Brenda standing on the dock, I believe, was taken during our honeymoon. You know, that time after the ceremony when it's what you look forward to. Following the ceremony at the church, we went to a motel which we had picked out ahead of time. Why? Because they had a water bed. And then the next day it was back to Brenda's parents to do the traditional opening of gifts and all that that meant. And then the next night, another motel in another town. Why? Because they had a water bed. Young, passionate, a little bit crazy and fun-loving. And on we went into our first jobs up in northwestern North Dakota and sorting out what it was to be married. That second picture came a number of years later. Brenda dressed up as a clown in order to do something at the church she was working at the time. Fun-loving, creative, yet as time went on, things kind of changed. For a while, I got a little more settled in just to make sure that everything went well instead of pursuing some of that wanderlust spirit. And yet there was some spontaneity. But as time went on, Brenda became probably a little more compliant, took on some roles of being safer in decision-making, where I continued to wonder. When my children asked when they came along about things and doing things, it was always, sure, let's give it a try, instead of, no, we can't do that. And so as that symbol way back about the two lights burning and the, how do you want to say, the glow of those candles intersecting in what is a marriage relationship, things continued to change. Why? Because life events change, because children come into the picture, and yet there was still that commitment of marriage. We had a water bed for a while, but got rid of it because, number one, they were not very energy efficient. Secondly, they sprung leaks. And lastly, it was just easier to transport traditional mattresses. So marriage is a journey. It's growth, it's change. It's not always just enjoyment and passion. It's looking at life in the real world. That picture that you just saw was taken a little over a decade ago. It is a picture of our family. We have two daughters. Both are in their fourth decade of life, live in different geographical areas of the United States, and they're enjoying life. One of the things, or one of the aspects of marriage that has probably been the most fulfilling to me is my daughters. It has been an adventure to raise children, not just the joys and the frustrations and the discipline and the laughter, but watching them become independent, watching them take care of their desires and their interests and their lives, and being able to connect with them now in a different way. They have brought a lot of joy, not just fun, but a lot of joy, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of meaning, a sense that I have provided as best I could to their becoming the people who they are at this point in their life. Back when Brenda and I were dating, we kind of teased, or I should say I teased about, yeah, it'd be nice to have 8 children. I was teasing, but times I think Brenda took it kind of seriously. 2 children have been plenty. As I said, they've been in many ways an unexpected joy. That wasn't something that I expected out of marriage. Yes, I expected to have children, but when we were first married, we didn't want children for a couple years, and birth control was a whole different thing at that point, and there were times we were using 3 different types of birth control. Talk about paranoid, but I guess it worked. And so the idea of marriage and family continues to evolve. It continues to grow. It continues to take on new aspects of life and new aspects of human beings that I never considered in those days when we were saying vows to each other in a church. Before we get to the last picture of this video today, just a bit of an update. If you watched 2 weeks ago, I had mentioned that I'm got a coach and I'm in training for an event that begins on New Year's Eve. Well, I just got done with another training session and things are going well. Did I always want to do long distance endurance events? No, when I like to be active, but when we were married, we did some camping and we did a little outdoor activity, but that soon came to an end, and I continued to like being outdoors, but Brenda didn't. And about 15 years ago or so, I got involved with a weight loss study, and part of that entailed exercise, and from that point on, it's ebbed and flowed a bit, but I've enjoyed being out and taking part in endurance events. Part of it, endurance, is not only for the body, but for the mind, for the spirit, for moving. Because in endurance events, as I had said way back at the beginning of all these videos, things don't always get worse. It may feel bad, but if you keep moving forward, you keep taking a step, if you keep focused on what's happening and not the end, you can keep moving forward. So I do that as well in a relationship of marriage. Instead of looking at what's out ahead, to try to focus on what's happening today and to see where that relationship is and where it can be strengthened and where we as individuals can keep developing our own personalities. So that final picture of Brenda and I was taken a couple years ago, and it was taken as part of a church directory photo. Brenda worked at Olivet Lutheran Church in Fargo, North Dakota until January of this past year. Due to a progressive neurological disorder, she had to stop working in January. That has caused all kinds of changes and dynamics in our relationship. For her, the church was very important and supportive, and she found a lot of meaning in it. And so to be taken away from that has caused a lot of disruption. I can be of support, but I can't be the same support that she needs from other communities. And she has been relying upon her Lutheran deaconess community quite heavily to get some of the support she needs. She no longer drives. She sometimes has inabilities to hang on to things, so broken glasses and cut fingers and other things have been a part of our life. And no, we don't have a waterbed anymore, and sometimes sleeping is even difficult, as some of the shaking that goes on as part of her disorder not only awakens her but awakens me. Did I ever think this was going to happen? In those simple little vows said 40 years ago? As I said earlier, I was more interested about what was going to happen on the wedding night than 40 years later. But we embrace what is, that tapestry, that bulletin cover, that as Christians, Christ is still the center of faith. That probably means different things for Brenda than it does for myself. For me, it means hope. It means perseverance. It means the grace to live each day. And some days those aren't pretty, and some days my reactions maybe aren't what other people think they should be, or even what I think they should be. But there's grace. Grace to embrace what is and to embrace myself. There's growth, even though that growth may not be the sort of nice experiential growth that people look forward to. Is it a prescription for everybody's relationship? No. It's an experiment of one. An experiment that's gone on for 40 years, and I still don't know what the future holds. But we keep moving forward. I keep moving forward day by day. I keep trying to develop my own skills and letting my own spirit and life shine and develop. And as Brenda deals with her situation as well, which is a lot more poignant than mine, we sort things out together. I thank you for watching once again. At the end of this video is going to be a picture of the anniversary card that I'm presenting to Brenda on this day to mark our 40th anniversary. It talks about weather. Living in the upper Great Plains, weather is constantly changing. Yes, we have seasons, but even within the seasons, there's heat, there's cold, there's drought, there's snowstorms and ice storms. And you take it as it comes, and you learn to sort it out and figure it out. I think that says a lot, again, about the relationship that Brenda and I have shared for 40 years. I'm thankful for it. It's the relationship I have, and the one that I kind of base things out of as I work with couples as well in different phases of their relationships. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your ongoing comments and support as I continue to make videos about life and about experiences, and in some ways try to be a little creative and carefree.